Any member of the public may view the meeting via the live stream at murraycitylive.com or on facebook.com, Murray City, Utah. Public comments can be made in person during the meeting or may be submitted by sending an email, including your name and address, to rda@murray.utah.gov. All comments are limited to 3 minutes or less, and email comments will be read into the meeting records. So, welcome. It's good to see everybody out. We'll start with business items, which the first one is approval of minutes for December 6th, 2022. Are there any changes? Oh, by the way, all of the members are here, and welcome to GL and the mayor, and also to, I just forgot your name, Brooke. Oh my goodness. Hate when that happens. So, anyway, we will have approval of the minutes for December 6, 2022. And are there any changes?
No.
If not, I would appreciate a motion.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of December 6, 2022.
And I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Any opposed?
No.
Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously, and we will continue to the public comment. Jared?
Thank you. I was going to just make a note, if it's all right, that we've received several emails to the RDA's email address. They seem to be in relation to the item on the agenda, the third item, the presentation and discussion about the sale of the real property. So I'm going to, if it's all right, I'll read those into the record at the time we take public comment for that item, instead of during the standard public comments, the general public comments, however you want to consider it that way. So
Right.
and
So
then
these
it's a
are
reminder for folks here tonight, today, we're going to be taking comment on the item on the discussion after we've had that presentation. So
perfect. So these comments are just general comments for the RDA. Okay. Are there any public comments for general? Okay. We'll continue on to the public hearing. Jared, do you want to take it from here?
just a quick kind of preface to to Mr. Yost's presentation. As a reminder, the property that we're discussing this afternoon, or that's on for Orden's presentation, is the current City Hall site that we're sitting in tonight and the acreage around it, and also the Murray Chapel. As a reminder for the board voted this past summer and made a resolution to explore the sale of those properties and to engage a real estate agency to do that. Mr. Yost is that real estate agency embodied, and is looking into that. So what he's going to be making a presentation about these properties, but I think it's important to note right at the outset that these properties were in the RDA meeting because these properties are owned by the RDA of the city, by the redevelopment agency, not by the city itself as a corporation. So the considerations are somewhat different. They've been in the RDA's ownership for a while, and we have resolved to try to see about the sale. He's going to be going over in his presentation the appraisals that were done for the properties, what those values mean, and what we might be able to do with monies received from those sales, other things we might be able to do in other redevelopment agency projects to roll that money back into the economic and community development of the city. So with that in mind, and again, just as a reminder, we will be taking public comment afterward, and we have some forms that I'm not used to handing out, but I've got them up here ready to hand out to you all as you want to make comments. So I'll try to work my way through that. But then I just wanted to turn the time over to Orden. And just as an aside, because we've allotted some time for this hearing, but we expect that we'll have a good discussion. We want to have a discussion, but if you would try to hold your comments as much as possible or your questions as much as possible until Mr. Yost is finished with the presentation, then we would be able to get through the questions after that. So as much as you're able to anyway, as that goes.
Okay, also, just for information, the board will not be voting on this tonight. That will be
Correct.
next month.
Right, this is just a discussion and presentation, correct.
Right.
Thank you, that's a great point.
Thank you.
All right, I'll get out of the way and let Mr. Yost talk.
Board RDA, thank you for asking me to come back again and presenting some of the information we talked about previously with more information available and potentially some clarifications on some of the things that we looked at last time. I think that we've had a good introduction of what we're going to discuss, and that those who looked online should have all the slides and information that we're going to use here. But if you have questions, certainly can obtain that information in the future. First of all, just to talk about the site, I think it's been somewhat clarified, but the site's outlined in yellow up there. It consists of this site and then two sites that used to be owned by the school district, which are on Myrtle Avenue. Combined, these sites all represent 5.98 acres, which is 260,488.8 square feet. And so those are the sites that we're talking about. It breaks down the two parcels on this slide, and on the right-hand page, it discussed what the conclusion of study done by a qualified, very qualified group in regards to the value of this property. I just want to point out in advance so that we're clear, the value of this property, and we'll talk about it later, but the value of this property is based on the property without any buildings on it. So in yellow, you see up there marketed value as if land only. The value that it's been appraised for is $14,330,000. And that price represents $55.01 to come up with that number. So some may be asking, what does that mean in regards to the rest of the marketplace? I think that's a very good number for this site, and we'll talk about the reasons why as we turn to the next pages. But anything at State Street in this size would be at that amount or a larger amount depending on what the demographics may be about it. So let's just slip to the next page to understand how they do appraisals and how this got to where it is. Obviously, in blue, the information where it says the economic value of real estate is based on what you can do with it. And again, our appraisal is only for land. The current zoning on this property is MCC zone, which envisions commercial, civic, cultural center for the community as intended to enhance physical, social, and economic connections. It's supposed to create a vibrant cultural environment with a strong emphasis on urban streetscape. There are three methods in which appraisals are made. These three methods are cost approach. That means replacement value of buildings and so forth, which is not part of this appraisal. The second is sales comparison, and that is additional properties throughout the marketplace that they've compared this property to. And the third is income capitalization. This property currently is not creating any income, and so therefore that's not used. So the only use we're using here is sales comparison. The process requires the appraiser to look at the physical possibilities, the legal permissible uses, financial feasibility, and the maximum use or productivity that can be brought off the property. And so those are the issues that has been looked at. Excuse me. So as we look at the appraisal, we see those items. Then we go on to legally permissible. So in this zone, it's under the MCCD zone, which is being potentially restructured and identified at this point. But at the time that this property comes for sale, we'll identify that completely. Is it financially feasible? And what would produce the most income off of this property for a potential owner of the property? The conclusion is that multi-use is the only project which meets the four tests of these highest and best uses. Now, the highest and best uses of this property can be when we talk mixed use, there are two types of mixed use. One is a horizontal mixed use, which would be layered on top of layers. And then the other would be a vertical mixed use project. In the following ones, I'm going to show you projects that are primarily vertical uses as opposed to those that are horizontal uses. Usually the horizontal in a project like this would be one level of retail, or it could be a office building or medical building or something of that site would help make this a multi-use type building. They could be separated uses. There could be a separate office building, could be a separate medical building, there could be a separate retail pads or something of that nature, and there could be a multifamily built on this site. So as we talk about this, the real issues gets down to the highest and best use on the property provides the city the most income from a tax and business sales process. And so that is one of the things that would be considered as the RDA moves forward in their decisions. Frankly, we're in the middle of the valley here. This is a wonderful location, and I think that we can yield this number or something in that area based on whatever use you as the RDA chooses to do. We're going to talk about density a little bit and give some examples of what the density thoughts are. Density is one of those things that's difficult to understand and determine. The property on the left side is a 4-story property, and I think if you look at that, you'll see that there's very little green area in that space. See that it's mainly asphalt area for parking, that there's not other areas that are comfortable for human scale to go into and use and function there. The other side is a 9-story project, and it has a lot of trees, green area. Evidently on this site, the majority of the parking has been done underneath the site. So the question, which one of these concepts is the highest density? And as we go to the next page, we see that they're both 60 units per acre. But because of the height of the one on the right-hand side, they've been able to use less ground, less energy, and provide a more contiguous place for humans, for us to use and to enjoy, congregate, gather in those areas. I think that some of the language here could be of interest. Density as a word is an abstract quantitative measure. It is ineffective in describing the appearance, form, or function of a city neighborhood. And I think as we look at these two pictures, it gives us some ideas of what can be accomplished by either one of these types of uses. This again, which image here is higher? The three-story project, which is on the left, and in the middle is a two-story project, and on the right is a six-story project. If you look at those, you'll see that more of the space is used for green and congregating areas and so forth in the right-hand one, where the other ones still show a lot of surface parking and use of that nature. So just to give you a thought of what occurs in those types of uses. The density on these projects on the left is 11 units. The middle one is 12 units, and the one on the far right has 12 units per acre. And that's basically how we determine what's allowed within a particular property is how many units or dwelling units can be there. These are some just different ideas that will give us ideas of items that potentially in the future at the time that this project is sold and a developer comes in and says, this is what we'd like to do. My understanding, if it's still correct, is that there will be a group put together who will look at design and function of each of these projects to evaluate and give the developer the guidance and direction. These properties, one is a townhome, one is a 4-story on grade, and the other one is a wrapped project. Now, what that means is that the main level or the main 2 levels of this project are cement or steel, and that the rest of the project is a wood use type of a project. These next ones as a podium with 200 units per dwelling unit. However, this is a smaller project, and it is a 3-story cement with steel on the upper. Now, that means that it's more expensive to build, but it means that being a type 1, it means that the products, materials used in it are non-flammable. So anytime we see type 1 in here, that is the highest and best type of construction. It's also the most expensive construction. This project that we see next I think I missed one. Oh, there we go back. This project here is one in Portland, Oregon. I included that because it's somewhat similar. For those that drive State Street, you're looking at the building across the street that's on Intermountain Medical Center's building, and the transition center looks a lot like this building does. The height is very similar to that building, and so when you leave, if you want to see kind of what that building would look like on this site, take a look at what we have across the street. This next building, I've included it because its height is 8-story. But it has a little more interest to it. You'll see that it comes and goes in and out. It has trees. The streetscape is attractive, and that the undulation of the building and the reliefs that are built into it make it more interesting. And these are things that the RDA may have an interest in as they work with a developer on this particular site. Now, the opposite of that is this structure. This is an apartment complex with 120 units per acre, and it just has a straight facade and is not very attractive. This one has a little bit more of interest in it. It's a 10-story product, and it has some setback and some undulation or in and out on the front of the buildings that make it a little bit more interesting. This is a project that is a combination. This is a vertical mixed-use project. The main floors of this project are commercial on each side, and usually the first or second floor here is being used for retail or restaurants, something of that nature. The one on the left side is actually a hotel, and the one on the right side is mixed use with retail on the bottom and residential on the upper portion. These next 4 buildings that we have are buildings that are all here in Murray. They're buildings that most of us have probably visited or familiar with. The top left-hand one is the one we have on the corner of 3rd West and Vine. And that's a medical building. No, excuse me. That one is over on 61st across north of the mall. That's the Moran Eye Clinic building. The one below that is the Transformation building across the street. And the one on the top right-hand side, that was the one that's on 3rd and Vine Street. And the one below that is one that is actually on the IMC campus. It is a 6-story on the bottom one. The top one on the right-hand side is a 4-story, and the ones on the left-hand side are 5 stories. Just to help you give an idea of what size and height means on particular buildings. The next ones on the right-hand or left-hand side top has retail. It actually has a grocery store on the bottom level and a pharmacy. Then it has residential on top, and then there is an open area behind it and steps back to another building which is multifamily, which is one of the kinds of uses that might be attractive to be used here on this site. The bottom one of this one is an interesting design to me, in that it has been worked hard to make it work as a human scale. That means that when we walk up to it and underneath it, there are undulations in the way the building's been built. There are canopies. There are trees. It softens the project and makes it feel better. On the next page it says Post District. Now, this is a location downtown Salt Lake that is going to be developed. It is where the Tribune and Desert News were printed previously on around 3rd South and 5th South and 3rd West. And it's a multi-use, but it's a vertical multi-use. It has different buildings being built on those, probably 8 acres there, a little larger than our site. And these are the ways in which they're going to take care of that. And obviously, you can get to that information on the internet if you wanted to. The next area is if the city, in regards to the RDA, were to make a choice to try to get the highest and best income out of this building, which would provide good opportunities for development to take place, which Jared talked about a little bit. I've included a couple of items here at the back of the project. The one on the left-hand side is where the new City Hall is located, and the street bifurcating that area down there, Hanauer Street, that's the new one. And as we've looked at this site, we've determined that it has the potential to have 2 parking structures added to it, which, number one, the parking structure up on 48th would help us with whatever use is chosen to go on what we call block number 1. Also, if you'll look in the middle there, there's a sign that's called the Promenade. This is a walking area which on a street that's now called Poplar that would take the whole street, and it would be a nice walking area, a place to do different kinds of activities, a place where we could have vendors, or we could have art shows, or we could have a variety of activities in this particular area. Part of the concept here is many of you might be familiar with a home called the Townsend Home, which is just on the other side of the little cafe on the corner of 5th Avenue and Poplar. And part of the concept here is there's a potential that the Townsend Home could be moved just south of the Murray Chapel and make that little sliver that's caught in between Hanauer and Poplar very functional, and an opportunity, a project to be sold. And they're part of what I've been asked to identify. Some of the information, if we go over to the other page, is we currently have the Murray Theater. And the Murray Theater, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but that's where the Murray Theater is. We don't have parking around Murray Theater. Some of our challenge to make downtown work and be invitive to people is to be able to get people down here so that they can walk around and have businesses that are attractive to go to. So one of the suggestions that I've made is that we take part of the ballpark surface parking and the hill that goes up towards the residential area there, that we put in a parking structure here. I think it's been recommended by some in the city that with the 300-seat theater that we need somewhere around 100 parking stalls for that. That could be built in this spot. It's owned by the city. There's a sliver somewhere in the middle of this that's owned by the school district, but the city owns this parcel primarily. And that certainly can be built. It might be of interest to some to understand that if we were to take about an acre out of our almost 6-acre property here, that that the value of the property and putting in 100 stalls would cost us somewhere in the $2,135,000 or $2,135,000 to create those stalls. If we were to build a above-ground property on the parking structure, we ought to be able to do that for somewhere in the process of $2,600,000. And we have actually more space there to do than what 100 stalls could be provided. The nice thing about that site is it could be loaded and have exits up even with Arlington, and that's a very short walk to the Murray Theater. This could also be an income-producing property for the city if they chose to use it that way. They could control it. Now, I've expanded the City Hall site a little bit and shown where the potential parking, shown where the promenade could go, and shown where the Murray Mansion currently is, the Murray Chapel is, and where the prospective location for the Townsend home would be in this project. And believe that those could make good sense. It would help us develop. We have attempted and worked with different groups to do Block 1. At some point, we will do Block 1, but then we have Block 2, and if we could build this kind of a promenade activity area in that area, it would help us develop that much faster. Here's just some pictures of what a promenade could look like. Could be multiple activities, checker matches. If we still do checkers, maybe we do chess. I'm not sure what we do, but we sure have a lot of different games nowadays. So this has been received quite well by a lot of people in a desire of what could happen in this particular area. That is my presentation, and I'm available for any questions that the RDA board may have.
Okay, I'll open this to the Board of Directors. So questions you might want to ask Gordon.
Gordon, the parking structures, when you say the capacity on the parking structures, again, can you give me an idea on height, on stories and so forth?
We can do 40 parking stalls in 20 to 25,000 square feet. So take, for example, the one directly behind that would most likely be a 2 or 3 story parking garage. It wouldn't be as tall as the baseball facility is. That would not dwarf it by any means.
Okay, thanks. That's, yeah, I just needed some scale of reference in that, so thanks.
So parking stalls are not really tall. They're not 10 or 12 feet.
Right.
They're usually smaller. The parking stalls I mentioned to go on 48th, that probably would have on the main level, would have some business opportunity on the main level.
Okay.
Coffee shop, bagel place, something of that nature would go on the front of that, so that was a nice walkable area, not bare parking out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
This question might be more for Jared, so feel free to jump in. But obviously, we're dictated by the MCCD code here, but we could do a specific code just for this parcel or some specific guidance, or it wouldn't even be called guidance at that time if it's in code for this particular parcel, what kind of things can we dictate in the code? Or what can we not dictate might be more helpful?
Okay, well, there's a couple of things to unpack there. To start with, you're right, it's in the MCCD zone right now. So as it stands, the MCCD zone and the regulations are what are applied there. They're what we would apply. The city can impose zoning of all kinds. You could rezone it to anything you wanted, really. So things that come up a lot, I'm just going to try to paraphrase. Things that come up a lot that people want to see that you cannot dictate through zoning. Ownership of housing units. There's no way for a city to dictate that these units shall be owner occupied. You just don't get to do that.
Okay.
And that's really,
That's
trying to think of other
That's
things
a big one, though, that comes up a lot.
that does come up a lot, yes. And there aren't really other restrictions that you wouldn't be allowed to impose with different zonings. We don't have any specific zone for this property. Other things to keep in mind about zoning for this property, you're going to continue to see pressure from the state legislature and really from the region for there to be higher density housing in this kind of core in the city. Marie, as Mr. Yost pointed out, is in the middle of the valley. And it's not just in the middle of the valley, it's on a high volume transit corridor in State Street that's going to soon have a bus rapid transit line running along it. It is also it's near the conjunction of the commuter rail, front runner, and the TRAX lines. So you have opportunities for transit here. That makes it a better location for higher density housing than some other locations, farther flung locations that don't have access to transit. You don't want to put the kind of densities that you have in mixed use zones in places where they don't have access to transit and other services.
Okay. And then I have two questions for Ordon. So first is, you mentioned a value, I believe, of the land only of 14,330. What happens to that value if we require the use or maintaining of the existing buildings, whether they can, come in here and do some remodeling to get this building to be something different, that we require certain things, we require them to keep this building? What happens to the value in that case?
I would guess the value goes down half if it goes that much. The challenge is.
So you're saying half or more, or
half, or could be more. The challenge with this building is that it's not seismically structurally sound. It has multiple other electrical plumbing issues that we're probably talking more than new construction cost to refit this building because of what it is. Part of the challenge with the building is the current layout, is that the bay depth from the halls to outside are not the sizes that we use for a lot of typical uses. And those kind of things will reduce the value to somebody else on the site.
Okay, are there other things that we could do, and the last question, other things that we could do in the code that you think would hurt the value, that would take that 14,330 down?
I think as long as we keep it mixed use and we keep the height a reasonable number, and I don't know what that number, it's a number you need to make a decision on what the height is, potentially could affect the use and the value.
You can't define what a reasonable height is, in your opinion.
In my opinion, somewhere in the 8-story would be a reasonable height on this building. If you take a look what's in the area, if you take a look at the topography, thank you very much. If you take a look at that, we're lower in front and we're lower in back. If we were to build higher product on the back side and down on Arlington, down on Myrtle Avenue, you're virtually not going to see that if you have a 3 to 6-story building in front.
Okay,
That goes away.
okay.
It's a step. We've looked at some of the buildings here that are step. We start with something a little lower in front and we increase it as we go back. And from the street, you have a difficult time of seeing what's back there. Okay. And the interesting thing is the backside doesn't have really anybody that the construction.
No residential back there.
Affect, yes.
Okay. And Jared, setback is something we can dictate in the code then?
Absolutely.
So we
And-
could
and
say something like it can only be taller if it's this far off the street,
True.
something like
Yeah,
that.
those are exactly the kinds of things that you want to control through your zoning.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to kind of give you a little pushback on the bus transit corridor. There is no master plan in UTA, and anybody can Google that for the next 5 to 10 years. So I'm going to continue pushing you back on that statement. And I've looked it up, and I've talked to even you about that. Can you talk about the 5501 square feet? Is that cost per square acre or square foot
It's cost per square foot,
of the land, correct?
yes.
And would that decrease if we do change code?
If we dramatically change what we currently have now, it would decrease it considerably.
Okay, thank you. And then as far as how much would a parking structure of 2 to 3 stories on average cost? And who would pay for that? Would that be the RDA? Would that be this project?
So if parking structures were going to be built in the spots that I've just talked about, those would be most likely RDA improvements to attract more business to the marketplace
Okay,
or to meet needs that the city has, i.e. The Murray Theater, and then to create other interest in the marketplace would be the RDA choices to do those.
and that would be your recommendation, is what I'm.
I would recommend that those structures be looked at. They may be evaluated. I'm not sure that the sites that I've put them at are the absolute perfect ones. I can tell you within 1 mile of Murray Theater, we have over 500 parking stalls that the city controls. But people aren't walking our streets. And if we really want that theater that we're spending a large sum to
Yeah.
refurbish to function properly, then it would make sense for us to try to potentially do something right there.
Okay, thank you. And in your recommendation, there's 3 parking stalls in this,
Three
and I'm,
parking structures.
I believe we need structures, yes, and I believe we do need that. It's very much affecting us here in our area now. With that, who would be paying for the promenade? If we were to sell this property, would that pay for itself, or would that go back to the RDA in the city?
Well, kind of the way it's designed now, if we're looking at the RDA as the catalyst to create more business in Murray, and by putting that in, that would help bring more business to Murray and create a walking scape area, then that typically would be the city's expense.
Okay.
Or the RDA's expense if they chose to do that.
And in your experience, have you, in selling property, can you talk a little bit about any previous cities or anybody who has kept historical structures and maybe some challenges, or what your recommendation has been there in keeping those structures with the sale of a property?
Typically, when we're looking at a specific property and whether something should be saved, it really has to do with the ability to rehab that property and whatever uses are available. So the zoning really affects what you can do on a property. This property that is going in at the Post District, which is a fairly interesting project, they are using some of the existing structures as a main level, and then are going up from that. And they're doing a variety of new builds, but it's a combination of that kind of thing. But they're on 8 to 10 acres. Their blocks downtown are 10 acres. Our blocks on Block 1 and Block 2 are 3 acres and a little bit. So those are about twice the size. This is about twice the size of that.
Okay, thank you. And just kind of lastly, would you, in your recommendation in selling this property, would we consider, I mean, I kind of already know the answer to this, but would we consider selling to somebody like a hospital? I mean, would that be a suggestion, or would we consider selling to someone where we would make profit on our taxable income?
Well, I think that there's no question from what I've been told in the process I've been involved in with you and with others from the city, is that this needs to be an income-producing property that produces taxes. The city owns enough ground currently that are not providing taxes that we need it. I live in Murray City. I don't want to see my taxes go up, and we have projects that if they were developed in whatever way that the RDA or the city chooses to do them, would eliminate some of the burdens from the individual family owners here in the market, and would like to see something happen that would be positive in regards to taxes on properties and sales taxes being created. I'd like to come down to Murray City and walk it, enjoy it, go get something to eat, have a good time, and be attracted to come here. Right now, we don't have a whole lot to be attracted to. Just most of the activity is going to the hospital because we're an older market.
Definitely. Well, lastly, I just want to say thank you, Jared, for working on this in the administration. I know I know my district is a little bit of the loudest, which I'm very proud of. But at the same time, I just want to be conscious in this moving forward that we're not just the loudest, but you know, we've been affected the most within this district, and we would be affected the most. And so moving forward, I will be mindful of that and in that process, but I want that too. I want a walkable community, but I also want it to be very intentional and mindful in all areas, not just eliminate one conversation because they are the loudest, but bringing them to the table. So that's where I kind of stand. So thank you.
So I work for you. I didn't come to make my personal opinions. Hopefully, I've presented this as options.
You definitely have,
Okay,
and I appreciate
thank
that.
you.
No, and I appreciate that. That's why I went by the steps, because I think it's we should make it clear on who's paying for what. I think the presentation's great, and I think it's a great opportunity. I would have loved to incorporate it a little bit more of some sort of different ideas, but I love the Townsend home and the chapel in there as well, and I've been saying that all along. But you know, there is a community that would love to see this building saved. And if it's not, you know, how would we put them into the fold of being a part of that conversation? And so that's where I will continuously say that.
Pam, do you have something? Or I have a couple more questions that I was gonna. You want me to go?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. You mentioned the Post District and how they're maintaining some of the historic or the existing buildings. Do you know if the code required that, or if that was ultimately something that the developer decided these are some cool buildings, let's keep them, let's keep a facade here, or do something with this? Do you know if that was a requirement, or if it was something that developer decided?
To my understanding, it was the developer's choice.
Okay.
We're talking about different kinds of buildings than this building, though. We're talking about industrial buildings that are 14, 16, 18 feet tall that meet the need for retail use on main levels. We usually are building at least 14 feet high ceilings and those kind of product.
Mm-hmm.
And so those lended themselves well to that. We might be at maybe 10 feet in here at the most, or
Okay.
9.6, whatever it may be.
Okay.
That affects it.
And then hopefully my last question, but who knows? I know there's a lot of concern over adding more residential in areas, adding density and that sort of thing. If we were to limit this area to only commercial, what do you think that would do to that value? In your opinion?
Well, we have an appraiser's opinion, more qualified than I am to answer that question.
But that opinion takes the highest and best use into account, which I believe you said is mixed use, correct?
Which is mixed use.
Okay. So you would see a decrease if we limit it to commercial only, which would include hospital or medical.
And I don't know what kind of commercial you're considering, would you consider?
Hospital is hospital.
Or,
It
sorry,
wouldn't be
medical.
considered commercial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. But
And-
other medical would be income
The
producing.
challenge with hospital, quote-unquote hospital, is the density of that hospital is much greater than the density of what's going to be here.
Right.
The only advantage to that is that visitors don't go there all hours, however they do, but not a lot of them. The
Right.
parking lots over there are fairly empty during the evening times.
Okay.
But as far as the density of a building, there are more units on a floor than we could ever do in an apartment building here.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I ask you a question?
Please.
I'm just curious, has anybody come to you or to the administration on looking at this property? And if so, how many people have come to you or to the administration that are wanting to buy this?
Well, there are a few people in the audience who have had questions. Jared has referred me to multiple, I would guess 10 to 15 companies who have shown interest in buying this property over the years,
Okay,
and whom I have spoken with, told them that I would keep them up to date, and when the property was ready to be sold, that I would let them know and help them understand what it is, and that's the reason we're going through this process, help them understand what they can actually build here. So I think that it can be a vertical multi-use, which I've said, which may be a medical practice in part of. a
with
building.
some residential?
Yes. To get anywhere close to the number we're talking about
Okay.
here, you have to have some residential.
Okay,
And I would think, opinion-wise, I would think the city and what Jared said earlier, we're going to be required in the future to create
yeah,
places for people to live, because that's what's happening in Utah. This is a prime location for that kind of use, and this appraisal has verified that to be the case. Doesn't mean it can't be mixed with other kind of uses.
right. And
Go ahead.
what is downtown Murray? Is it the mall? Is it going to be,
We don't have a downtown.
I mean, is it going to be City Hall? Or is it going to be here? Everybody asks me, some people ask me, where is downtown? Is it the mall or is it here? Is it City Hall? So I'm just throwing it out. Do we want to make this downtown?
Well, I
This
think-
area or,
I personally think downtown is from 53rd potentially to 45th, depending on what development occurs between there
Okay.
and there.
okay,
Fashion Place is Fashion Place, and it's a great project. And we're going to see some more projects developed to the north of that
okay,
that will be beneficial to the city based on the zoning and the interest of the owners of the property. But this is 6 acres.
yeah.
Where do you get 6 acres between 45th and 72nd to do something that will stand out and say, you finally got here, you're not in South Salt Lake anymore.
Yeah, the only problem I have is when I go on Main Street and State Street, the buildings are so close to State Street, the apartments or the townhomes or whatever, they're so close to the main, and that's where I have some of the problems with
So
that.
that's where our zoning,
Yes,
what you
yes.
choose, if you choose to do
A
a step back
Yep,
from there, but the zoning requires that you have things within,
yeah,
right up against the street. That's what your zoning requires. That's why it's been built that way. And that's not atypical to any municipality. That's why streetscape that we've talked about here, I've given you pictures of some that look really good and some that would look terrible sitting on this property. And that was the reason that, and that's a lot of minutia to go through, but I wanted to give you some ideas of what kind of thing would look good in front of this property that I would be happy to have in downtown Murray. And I would hope that as the RDA reviews these items, and that when we start asking for offers,
Okay.
that we find developers who understand our concerns and are willing to do some things to mitigate. Just a nice streetscape in front brings it down. I mean, the trees along the front bring it down to human scale. You're driving by here at 40 miles an hour. Has the transition, Billy, affected you negatively across the street? It goes away because it's got nice green area.
Yep.
It just develops. So
Setbacks.
that's
Yeah.
what I'm suggesting that you consider,
Yeah.
but whatever choice the RDA chooses will be wonderful.
Rosalba wants to say something, and then I would like to
Okay.
say something.
I'm just going to ask this last question. Jared, how much was the property appraised for Block 1 again? Where were we with that? Was it like three?
For Block 1, the
Correct.
city-owned property on Block
Yeah.
1? I don't know the number of that. Do you know that, Orton?
I think it was somewhere around 5 million, wasn't it?
5 million. So this is twice the value of that. And the acreage is, I mean, the acreage is
Well, it's-
3 times, sorry, correct. I stand corrected. But it's, I know it's, the acreage is bigger, but on that, at that time, I remember saying our property is worth a lot more. We as Murrayites deserve a lot more. And everything you've said, I agree with, and I just wanted to state that because there's value in this property, and I think we need to consider that as citizens. One thing I've always heard from even in canvassing was I don't want to bond anymore. We shouldn't bond anymore. And so I think when we move forward in these decisions, we really need to consider that as well. Because if we don't come to a point of agreement on this property, we're missing out on a great opportunity. But I would love to make sure we're considering everything as well. So that's the last thing I have to say.
All right, no. Next month is when we will consider the MCCD, if we want to keep it the same, if we want to change it. At this point, it allows for 10 stories. At this point, that's what it allows for. That's why we are going to reconsider it and make some changes based on what we've been hearing from our citizens and the information we received from the questionnaire that, the survey, questionnaire survey, whatever. Anyway, based on the survey. So, that's when we will, I mean, there are specific things we can do based on, when we determine that zoning. And I think we all want the same. I think we want a walkable, attractive, interesting downtown, and not something that is so dense. Something, like you said, people want to come to, and so that's what's on our plate for the next few weeks. And so unless there are any other comments,
Diane,
Phil?
I would just like to thank Orden. I'm new on the council. I haven't asked a lot of questions tonight. But one of the first things I did, I was given your presentation, and I've studied it repeatedly, and I've tried to learn as much as I can. And that made it very simple for me. It put it in really simple terms. And when I ask about a parking structure, I'm a very visual person, And that's how I understand, and I think you've really helped me to understand this. And I look forward to having more questions, especially after the public comment. So thanks.
And with that, I think we'll open the public comment. However, Jared has some comments that he's received via email, I think.
Yes.
And so he will read those, and then we will open it for the comments that from you people that are here.
Okay. Thank you. And we've received a few while the hearing's been in progress, so I'll read those as well, but I'll start with the ones that we received before the hearing. And I'll try to keep moving along at a pretty good clip. So we got time for folks that are here live to speak. The first comment I have comes from Christine Levon. I hope I'm saying that right. It says, "Hi there. I'm a concerned citizen that would like my voice heard concerning high-density apartments in Murray. We have some that are already being built and no one lives in them yet. We should wait to build new apartments till we see the impact that these new places will bring to our streets and neighborhoods. It is hard to believe the city when you speak of drought and water preservation, but are inviting thousands to come to live in Murray and of course increase the water use. It really does not make sense when you say there is a shortage, but let's invite thousands more people to the area to use the water we have a shortage of. Also, all this building will cause so much more congestion to our already crowded roads. I also suppose this will all make my property tax go up because I am expected to pay for all the so-called upgrades. If you do anything, please beautify the Murray downtown area with some nice businesses and cool front facades. Increased traffic, higher property taxes, air pollution, and increased crime is not what Murray citizens want. A population explosion in Murray is a big no. How about if you don't build it, they won't come? Sincerely, Christine Levon." And it's always nice to have a little color in them. There you go. Oh, are you Christine? Okay. Thank you. This next one is from Jamie Peterson. Please save the former Arlington Elementary School. It's one of the few historical landmarks Murray has left. The building would make a great arts center, senior center, or preschool. Apartment buildings add nothing to our little community but increase traffic congestion and overwhelm our schools. As someone who lives in the shadow of the enormous high-rise being built on the former First Ward Carnegie Library site, I am seeing firsthand the negative side effects of tearing down our history in favor of high-density housing. The noise and traffic has already altered my neighborhood in a very negative way. Jamie Peterson, Murray resident. This next one is from Liz Jacob. I cannot believe it every time I drive down Vine Street and see that atrocious 6-story apartment building just above State. Are we so desperate in Murray that we have to resort to giving building permits to this type of construction? And now a possibility of another one by Murray Park. Enough already. Keep Murray the cozy community that we moved to 35 years ago. Again, that was Liz Jacob. Michael Cagliano. I hope I'm saying that right. Hello, my name is Mike Cagliano. I live in Murray on Vine Street across from Parkside Elementary. I'm very concerned about the number of high-rise, high-density apartment complexes being built in Murray. I feel as if there isn't enough consideration for the homeowners in the area that purchased a home and pay taxes to live in a neighborhood to all of a sudden have hundreds of people moving directly across the street. The renters can move if things aren't going well. The homeowners don't have that luxury. The schools cannot support this either. Their rankings continue to plummet. I would recommend looking up the rankings of the elementary school that would need to support it. It's one of the worst in the state, by ranking, not by opinion. I feel as though there is no planning taking place. As soon as a lot of land is available, then another several-story apartment goes up. Please get a comprehensive plan together. Stop doing what is easiest and start doing what is right. This next comment is from Nancy Snowland. Please do not even consider a 10-story high-rise by Murray Park. I have lived on Vine Street for over 20 years and cannot even imagine the congestion this will cause between State Street, 5300 South, and Vine Street. It says it's signed Nancy Christofferson. Sorry, I might have got the name wrong. The next comment is from Janelle Klingler. To whom it may concern, I understand there is an opportunity to look at a 10-story apartment complex in the area of Murray City Park. I feel like a 3-story maximum would be wise, not only for visual reasons, but also keeping the density lower, including first responder load. I'd love to see the Arlington preserved. Any buildings added or remodeled would be so fantastic if they kept the historic feel like the parts of downtown. An example would be Dave Murray Music. Thanks for your consideration. This next one is Doug Sutherland. A Facebook post was posted encouraging citizens to contact this address to stop the sale of the property for high-density residential. I am doing the opposite. I strongly support the property being sold for as much money as possible and that money being used to rebuild the downtown area. I would love to see parking structure, and money to rebuild the retail center downtown. Also, I definitely think that the pedestrian bridge between Murray High School and Hillcrest Junior High School should be rebuilt. There have been student accidents that could have been avoided if that was done. I hope there are not more serious accidents. Thanks, Doug Sutherland. Tori Crowell, to whom it may concern, unfortunately, I send this email with little hope, but some just the same. I have been a citizen of this wonderful city for 35 years. I have seen the city change, and I have not been a fan of the change along with many of your current and old residents. I have had many neighbors move away because they were tired of not having their city listen to their concerns when it comes to the development of our community. I just read that the option for a 10-story apartment complex is a possibility for this site once the new city hall is completed, and I am absolutely blown away that this is even on the docket. My kids are already calling the new 7-story condos on Vine Street the Stalker condos because it towers over the park. They said anyone who lives there can see everyone and everything happening at the park. It is awful. I'm going to get the periods in there. It is awful. Make sure I get it right. The city did a survey recently to which myself and many neighbors replied, and the consensus was that buildings should not be over 3 stories and that they should maintain a historic look. Nothing that has been built in recent years has followed any of these desires from your citizens, and I feel that this is because city developers seem to act like they know better than the citizens who live there. Please, please, please do right by your citizens, please. Where will the parking be for the Murray Theater once it's complete? If you allow a 10-story apartment building, residents will be using that parking in the evenings at the same time as the events in the theater. What about the infrastructure to support this change if it were to happen? I know that infrastructure played into the desire to create housing on the Best Buy property. What will happen to the history of the Arlington? Will it disappear like everything else that we have all loved about Murray? Murray has given up so much space to high-density housing. It has lost so much of its appeal. There were times when people would tell me how lucky I was to live in Murray because of that small-town feel and because we had such history on display. But now we are turning into a dime a dozen, and those same people have told me that it seems like the city is only in it for the money. I wish you would please consider changing the zoning. Please do not allow more high density in our town just because the dollar amount is appealing. Sometimes it's important to do what is morally right versus what is financially appealing. I have yet to see the city truly consider this. Every time they go for the money, every time, and we are losing so much from that. I do have just a couple that came in by email while we were in the process of conducting the hearing. Let me just make sure I don't miss them. Okay, I'll try to do these in the same order as well. This email is from Ron Dunn. Please dial back from the excessively tall apartment buildings. We don't need to compete with Salt Lake City. I would prefer to see a much shorter building, more in keeping with Murray's downtown skyline. I also worry about Murray's infrastructure and utilities. At what point will the schools, roads, utilities, such as water and sewer, and parks be overwhelmed? I have seen a number of former neighbors move to more distant suburbs and wonder what they know that I don't. I've lived in my Murray home for 36 and a half years. In sum, please table this proposal and look at other options. Thank you, Ron Dunn. This one is from Christine Dunn. I just read about the proposed high-density housing project the RDA is under pressure to approve for the property where the current old city hall is located. For the size of our city and the projects already under development, I think this is a huge mistake to approve. Our infrastructure, power, and water will be hit hard, not to mention the congestion that will be caused with parking and moving in and out of said building. In addition, the proximity to Murray City Park will make the park a much less safe and desirable place to use. We already have a problem with unleashed dogs attacking other dogs and people, and with units that need places to walk dogs, it would be the first choice. Currently, it seems that all Murray is interested in is money that comes from all these projects, and he who has the most money making the proposal wins. I feel strongly that this proposal needs to be tabled for the time being and other uses looked at that would benefit the existing community living here. The livability of Murray has decreased so much in the 36 plus years I've lived here. Can't we be a little more creative than this plan? Please don't rush the process because a builder has a plan ready to go whenever a spot opens up. And this is Tom Gerard. To whom it may concern, my name is Tom Gerard. I live in historic Murray, 5333 South Montrose Street. My children are the fourth generation of our family to grow up and live here. The last thing this city needs is more high-rise, high-density housing. We have already had to endure more traffic, more crime, noise pollution. No more of these types of projects should be approved, especially in historic Murray. Keep our history and public spaces as they are. Thank you, Tom Gerard. And this one is from, from Melanie Kimball. There we go. I wanted to let you know about my views on the Murray City Office's Arlington School sale. I'm concerned about selling to a developer that will put a 10-story apartment complex on the site. I know Murray needs more affordable housing, but there seems to be a lot in the works already. The R.C. Willey site, the 7-story apartment complex on Vine Street, Best Buy, and the possible Galleria site for apartments. Have a thorough discussion and allow input from citizens regarding this issue with a decent time frame. A 2- or 3-story building would be more aesthetically appealing to downtown Murray. The park is one of our family's favorite places to recreate and enjoy the small-town feel of the community. Medical offices would be my preferred choice and would blend in well with the surroundings. Thanks for all you do to make our community better. Sincerely, Melanie Kimball. And I have 2 more. Tony Despain. My name is Tony Despain. My address is 4691 South Meadowview Road. I do not want more high-rise apartments in Murray. Let's keep Murray historic and make it a library. Sincerely, Tony Despain. And Jane Andersch. I think I got that right. I would like to express my strong opposition to the plan to build a high-density 10-story high-rise near Murray Park. As a 40-year resident of Murray City, I see this as a disturbing trend that is changing the single-family community of Murray into something that is almost unrecognizable. Please keep high-rise apartment buildings away from the crown jewel of our city, Murray Park. Sincerely, Jane Andersch. And that is, I believe, all that I have.
All right, great. Okay, now we will open the questions to those of you who are here. And just a reminder that we have a 3-minute allowed time. And Jennifer has the paperwork that you need to fill out. Oh, Jared has it. All right. Okay, Jennifer will time. Jared will pass out the forms. Anyway, so now's the time.
Hi, Clark Bullen, District 3. I live just on the other side of the ballpark, so quite possibly the closest house to this property. I understand how it could be really tempting to go for the highest dollar value for the property. The money could be used to help pay for the new city hall, among other things presented by Mr. Yost. Thank you. On the other hand, citizens are generally not in favor of higher density and high rises, as you just heard. But to make a decision between both of those, luckily, we did a survey last summer, and that was regarding the direction of downtown. Part of that survey was specifically about Block 1, by 4800 South, but I'd say at least half of it was regarding downtown. And it had citizens touch where they thought downtown was, and that included what Mr. Yost said, from about 53rd up to 4800 South. So these statistics I mentioned are from that part regarding specifically downtown. So 66% of people strongly or somewhat like the historic buildings and character of downtown. 76% strongly or somewhat would like to see those historic buildings in downtown rehabilitated. 68% strongly or somewhat support using tax dollars to restore historic buildings, and specifically the ones in downtown back to their early 20th century initial build. So I'd say based on those, our best option is to restore and repurpose the Arlington to its original beauty. Now, if for some reason we just can't figure out a way to do that, as indicated by what the citizens want, then I want to point to some other statistics from the survey. 70% strongly or somewhat support replacing some buildings with historic looking buildings or buildings with a historic look and feel. 72% prefer traditional over modern architecture. 67% prefer brick building materials. 67% prefer 3-story buildings. So I'd say our second best option is to implement a historic design requirement of 3 stories or under, incorporating brick, similar to the medical building just behind us. So based on the survey comments as well, not just those statistics, but if you read all the comments, I'd say 70% or more say no more high density, preserve our history, and the like. So I just wanted to say that I think it is clear what the citizens want. No high density in downtown, restoration of historic buildings, a historic design guideline downtown, no more than 3 stories, and they consider this building to be downtown. Thank you.
Hi, I'm going to go. My name's Margaret Paul. I'm a certified urban planner with 30 years' experience. I'm retired. So anyway. And generally, planners are pro-growth, but we're pro-smart growth. And in this case, I'd like to point out to you, in case you haven't noticed, that the quality of life in Murray has decreased dramatically in the last 10 years. This is represented by no parking at the post office. I mean, the post office lines are incredible. This is also represented by a line at the pool all summer long, even on weekdays. There's a line at the pool is closed to capacity at noonish, and nobody else can get in until somebody comes out. The line at Costco for gas. The parking lot at both of the Smiths in Murray city boundaries. Crowded, no buggies. I mean, it's so the thing is, our quality of life here has decreased as a result of population growth. Now, the other thing I'd like to point out is nobody aspires to live in an apartment. No one wants to. I mean, so the kids do it for a little while until they can build up the money to get to a single-family house, or the old people do it because they retire and they whatever, So we saw the same thing in the 80s with townhomes. There was a huge construction of townhomes, and townhomes were just a stepping stone for people who wanted to live there until they could afford to parlay out and get a single-family detached house, and that's the same thing that's going to happen with these apartments. I feel like, you have to look at a building's lifespan, which is between 50 and 70 years. And so any decision you make now is going to be there for a long, long time. And we don't know if those apartments on 900 East by Walmart are going to be occupied. We don't know if these apartments are going to be 100% occupancy. And we're running out of water. Oakley is the only city that has to date decided that they need to quit issuing building permits. And so at some point, we're going to have to, all of the cities are going to have to make that hard decision to stop. And, I was big with Envision Utah 20 years ago. I know about, they're coming, we've got to build, blah, blah, blah. But now there's a time for planners and decision makers to go the other way, to say, this is it, that's enough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeff Evans, District 1, and I would really like to welcome my new representative up there. Rock on. I have a unique perspective of being on planning and zoning for 9 years. I just completed a 4-year term on the Arts Advisory Board, and actually just came last Friday from the real estate economic forecast. And it's just time to be real a little bit, is we're in a city of 1.3 million people. And other than Idaho, if I remember right, we have the hottest economy and influx of folks anywhere. So they're coming, whether you like it or not. What I look at this is, I'll use an analogy of the Murray City Parkway Trail along the Jordan River. When I've ridden my bike across it, I can't even remember how many countless times. But the second northbound, you're in the West Jordan part, and you go underneath Winchester and you pop out into Murray, you instantly know you're in Murray. When you come from Vine Street into the where the confluence of Little Cottonwood Creek and the Jordan River, you instantly know you're in Murray. For the first time in forever, you have a shot of a blank slate right here. A city-defining development that is the gateway to our beautiful park, a gateway to all of our the amenities we have here. I've spent the last 2 years with Clark over here with the design of the Murray Theater rebuild. And with all of that going on, I mean, we need to have the infrastructure in place to make these things work. How many times have you gone on the Front Runner or the tracks to go downtown or to Ogden or something to see things or do things? For the first time, we might be able to put something together that causes people to get on the Front Runner to come to Murray to see something or do something. I mean, again, it's been said a million times. How many times do we have a blank slate to let people know the second they cross over 45th or Winchester, you're in Murray, and it's different and it's cool. Yeah, we have to mitigate what type of development, but Clark, I was on planning and zoning. We did the historic district with the design guidelines. Didn't work. Developers wouldn't touch it. Maybe the climate has changed by now. I don't know, but they wouldn't touch it. Yeah, it basically is what the market provides and what the demand is. And the demand is that we have a great city. And anyway, you have a blank slate. Let's paint something cool. That's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Hi, my name is Amy, and I am in District 3, and I live on Vine Street, pretty much right across from what I like to call the monstrosity, not the stalker houses, but I think monstrosity is stalker. They're the same. So I'm here today to encourage you to prioritize preservation of this building to support our collective efforts to create a better city for the residents of Murray and our future generations. We have already lost many historic spaces important to our city's heritage, and in their place, we have experienced an influx of mixed-use high-rises that the citizens of Murray are not proud of. I'm willing to bet many of you are also not proud of some of these buildings. There's no reason we have to put ourselves in a position to later regret the decisions we make here today or in the near future. By preserving and adaptively reusing the building we already have, we can conserve resources, reduce waste, and save money by repairing and reusing existing buildings instead of tearing it down to end up in a landfill. To put the environmental cost of this into context, when a modestly sized house in Utah is demolished, it generates 350 tons of waste for the landfill. That's as much waste as one person would generate in 445 years. While rehabilitating that same house would only generate 50 tons of waste. As a human being who values our quality of life to include clean air and available water, this is simply not acceptable to me. Additionally, there was a focus on density during the presentation earlier, so I want to add that to the discussion that a recent analysis across the U.S. found that in 43 of 50 cities, the average population density was greater in historic neighborhoods compared to modern neighborhoods. In Salt Lake, the density score for neighborhoods of historic and smaller buildings was 65.1, compared to a density score of only 23.4 in neighborhoods of newer and larger buildings. Historic neighborhoods have more than twice the population density. This is because density does not have to equal large mid-rise buildings wrapping around parking garages. There are plenty of ways to increase density that don't involve destroying the historic fabric of our communities. The Arlington School represents many opportunities for the city, such as affordable housing, market rate housing, our new library, event space, remote office space, and the list goes on. While the building stands, even empty and unused, 4 things can be done. 1, nothing. 2, stabilize the building and wait. 3, rehabilitate the building, or 4, tear it down. Option 4 is always available, but if that option is used, all of the other options are eliminated. While this building is still standing and under city control, RDA control, all future potential is still available to us. But once it's gone, we can't bring it back. You remove all future potential and possibility. Bulldozers remove things that cities need. They remove memories and scale. Don't keep making these same mistakes over and over again. We need to do better this time. Murray's economic success depends on the stewardship of its neighborhoods and buildings like the Arlington. Only when we advocate for our historic buildings and the memories and stories they are made of can we make vital decisions that move us all forward. I ask that you please consider either keeping this building for a community space, and we can figure it out together, or at least sell with deed restrictions that would prevent a potential buyer from full demolition. We need to save this building for generations to enjoy and cherish. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
Rachel Moreau, Vice President of the Historic Murray First Foundation, also in District 3. And I'm speaking on behalf of the foundation, so I can have 5 minutes, right? Are we still doing that?
Yes.
5 minutes for groups? Okay,
Yes.
Great. I'm going to read my comments so that I can make the best use of my 5 minutes. Highest and best income. This phrase has been said a lot today, and it's usually said a lot in council presentations, and sadly is the main and usually the only factor that ends up driving votes made by municipal governments. When do we get to balancing this with highest and best quality of life for the people that already live here? Isn't that supposed to be at least of equal consideration to you, our elected representatives? Quality of life of the taxpayers should not be sacrificed to higher and higher density infill. I appreciate Orden's presentation. It was very instructional. It also featured a lot of the same homogeneous, modern block-style architecture that has unfortunately come to define urban spaces in Salt Lake Valley. We would appeal to the RDA to firstly make decisions that will help us preserve what remains of our historic urban landscape. Truly, we've lost so much real, and I'm not talking monetary, value in our city because of the failure of past city administrations to save our historic built environment. Secondly, if we have to plan for more infill, we ask you to look for developers who are willing to be guided, and they exist, by the wishes of the community who have expressed a majority desire for a historic appearing downtown. Please implement a style guide or style menu for those developers bidding for this property. We're still dealing with historic preservation disregard, and I am going to quote from a recent Murray Journal article on Murray moving forward in 2023. Doug Hill was quoted as saying, "The historical protections can be removed very easily," and in reference to these buildings, since the city owns the property, the RDA owns the property. All that's required right now is the ordinances, in the ordinances is that the mayor just has to basically write a letter to the planning department and request the historical protection be removed. It's as simple as that. From this administration, even in the face of the Y2 Analytics survey that they conducted and which concluded that between 65 and 70% of residents want an aesthetically appealing and historic style commercial district. Thirdly, when will we get answers to the current concerns we have raised over capacity issues and overburdened infrastructure? Again, quoting from the Murray Journal article, Doug Hill says, power might actually probably be one of the biggest issues that our citizens will be impacted by next year, and that would be this year. So these are admitted problems that we're dealing with. These questions from the citizens keep coming up, and we're yet to hear practical plans from our elected representatives about when is enough. When are we going to be so overcrowded with people and dogs in Murray Park that it's no longer an oasis or even usable? When is the actual water and electricity shortage and strain going to be real enough to stop more density from being added? And I will say, I know that this isn't generated with you guys. I know that this comes from the state and the county. And so admittedly, you're in a difficult situation, and I can appreciate that. But you are our advocates. Just because every other city is doing the same type and amount of infill in answer to county and state requirements doesn't mean Murray should. In fact, it means we should do something very different. The citizens deserve that. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel.
This is always so intimidating.
Well, don't.
Jen Keegle-Lynn, and I'm in District 3, and I have all my notes. Thank God, because I don't know.
What was your name?
Jen Keegle-Lynn.
Okay. Thanks, Jen.
I'm a Murray resident for 50 years, living in my fourth generation home, but also I'm an owner of a real estate company and owner of commercial properties in Murray. My memories of historic buildings here are deep, like many of you. I went to elementary school here, and I have a scar in my hand hitting a piece of glass rolling down the hill to prove it. It's my Arlington scar. I was married at the Murray Chapel. My dad played his band at the Murray Theater, and I went to preschool at the old library. Growth and change can be scary, but it can also be exciting. There are many ways to teach the next generations about the history and deep roots of our city without attempting to spend money on the City Hall. For example, we already have incredible resources to showcase the city history at 3 beautiful historic homes. The mansion, which you're all aware of, is an immediate resource right now. Beautiful things have been done with that already. And we have the Townsend home and the chapel, and obviously the plans for those are to be determined. These 3 pillar properties are already located in downtown and perfectly located to potentially house multiple future opportunities for the community, historical resources, and much more as the downtown develops. I would love to see the city focus on the restoration efforts in this area rather than the massive City Hall acreage. Maybe a focus moving forward would be requiring the future preservation of just these 3 buildings for historic downtown, and would also assure bringing future revenue as well. As far as the City Hall, it has a long list of expensive repairs that have already been talked about, but neither the city or an investor should take on, and the proposed land development has the opportunity to set up our city well long-term financially, which benefits all of our pocketbooks. Redevelopment, adding commercial and residential, also allows local entrepreneurs like myself to grow deep roots both personally and professionally, as well as create the American dream of having a business in their hometown in a live, work, and play environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen.
So, hello, my name is Annie Suksri. I'm the owner of the Tea Rose Diner in Murray. And I consider myself as a resident here because I was here for 15, 16 years and tried to maintain, the building that almost like next to me is considered almost a historic, the flower house. And because it's not up to the code, so they don't allow me to help maintain that building until it's fall apart. And so, so when I heard about this, and I want to be a part of this because I've been in Murray for a long time, quite a long time, and so I want to move forward to keep the chapel as my restaurant. That's what I want to approach, and then keep it the same as historic, because keep outside and make it more revenue to the Murray City. The problem is, do I can afford it? That is another thing, right? So yeah, so. If it's, as it's come to you want to sell the chapel, so I probably be honored to take care of the building. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Jonathan Oliver. I'm a current resident of Draper and a future resident of Murray. Actually, excited future resident of Murray. It's a beautiful town. I develop in this town. I have two developments currently. I've had a couple in the past in Murray. I've developed in 8 states. I may not be as big as some of the buyers that are looking to purchase this site, but I am interested in this site. I've developed in 23 cities, and I keep coming back to Murray, and it's not hard to see why. you see the passion of the Historic Society. You see the excitement and the tie to the history. That's how I feel about Ogden, and that's how I feel about Murray. I've lived in several cities in the state of Utah, and I'm excited, like I said, to move here. There's been a lot of divisiveness, I would say, one way or the other. And it doesn't need to be. I don't see that. I see there are options, costly options, but there are options that could bridge that chasm between the highest density and the lowest density and the greatest cost. There are developers like myself that do feel a responsibility to the cities, to the residents, to the communities, that we're not the government. I'm sorry. We actually need to, as business owners, we have to make a profit, or else we don't exist. But at the same time, we can do it responsibly. So there are options we can look at. It doesn't necessarily need to be 10 stories. There can be promenades. There can be, bonding isn't the worst thing in the world, if it's done right. I have done that in other cities, and it's worked out fantastically. So I would say that just to keep as many options on the table as possible, and just see what works best. I feel that a mid-rise is a good medium, and mixed use is a great medium. But there are a lot of things, and there's a lot of education that needs to go both ways, as far as costs, taxes going up and down, resources, and so forth. So it's really just education, getting away from the divisive talk and finding a middle ground. So.
Thank you.
Good evening, Jay Ballwinkle. I live by Murray Parkway Golf Course. I've enjoyed living in Murray for 22 years now. It's been great. Urban planner, I've redeveloped a lot of downtowns over many years. I've done a lot of work in Murray. That's been a lot of fun. I think it's an exciting project. I think vibrancy is important when you're trying to redo a downtown, and it takes people to create vibrancy, but it needs to have amazing quality open spaces to make it happen. And I loved Orden's presentation. I ate at Annie's restaurant last week. We need to have restaurants like that in our downtown so that it can bring people. But, make sure that the good quality is, I echo Jeff's comments too. I think that he had it right on the button. Let's do something to make Murray great, and I'll support that. Thank you.
Thanks, Jay.
Hello, Board. I'm Janice Strobel, also from District 3. And I also wanted to welcome Phil to being part of our council and RDA Board. So I have lived, this summer, it will be 30 years that I've lived in Murray, and just 2 blocks away from here. My home was built in 1908. So, I do have an affinity for what is been around for a while. And we've been a city now for getting close to 120 years. And there's been a lot of history with those 120 years. We have developed quite a sense of identity for our community, a sense of place. We've gotten known as the Independent Republic of Murray by some maps. With our independence, we just have everything that we need. We have our own power company, we have our own school district, so we've got a lot of things that have kept us operating on a very independent mindset. So with all that, I would say we do have quite a unique identity. The decisions that you will make about this property and any changes to downtown zoning will greatly influence our city's identity for the next 100 years. So what I'm asking that you consider doing at this time is let's take time to define the vision for our town, for our downtown, a comprehensive plan that, and when I talk about downtown, I am talking about the Murray City Center District. That is what seems to be the meat of our downtown at this time. Let's get that comprehensive plan and a vision for what our identity is going to be of our downtown before we piecemeal out what will be built in some parts of that. And I appreciate that you're taking the time to really consider what gets built here and how that will influence the identity for our downtown and what we can do in our downtown based on what gets built here and in other areas, because we don't want to limit, if we put all our eggs in one basket for this development, we have to limit what we do with other areas of our downtown, in that, we have to be mindful of how much we're going to draw on the resources that are in our area, with us being a desert town. And thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Janice.
Hello. I wasn't going to speak, but I'm going to. I was at the legislature today, okay? So I've
Could I have your
Colleen
name?
Bascom Taylor, longtime resident here. 69 years here. Anyway, so I think what is being overlooked a lot is I'd love to ask by a show of hands, how many of you have gone to any one of our elementary schools and looked at the capacity in our elementary schools right now? We're on overload with our children, with our grandchildren. I have 22 grandchildren. And I think what doesn't happen enough is that people don't go and speak directly to those little children. When, at the legislature, when I've done this job, I'm executive director for 3 different governors, so I show up there all the time. Tragically, it's our children who are going to suffer through this with another high-rise. Murray is a small group. We have a limited number of elementary schools. Parkside should have been rebuilt how many years ago? Somebody answer me, please, because now my grandchildren and great-grandchildren are in the mix. And yet, we're thinking of a big high-rise at Arlington, and my sister went here, and like I say, I'm here for a long time. It's our children who are going to suffer the consequences of more people here that we can't accommodate. And that's what's so, if none of you have gone over and read with a child for 20 minutes at Grant or Macmillan or, sorry, not Macmillan, Macmillan, that's where my other grandchildren are, go take the time to do that. Go walk through those doors and see how those children are suffering. So in the state of Utah, where we're still the very lowest of funding, congratulations us, it's because so many want to move back and stay here. And that's great. I want my children and grandchildren close. However, we are overtaxing our children and our elementary schools now. I met with a teacher on Sunday, as a matter of fact, and she said we are bursting at the seams. I don't know how many of you speak multiple languages, like 12 different ones at Parkside Elementary right now. Now, Murray District and Salt Lake District, 169 languages. So we're not there yet, but come over to Murray Elementary Schools and help be an advocate for those children who are not even speaking first language English yet, and help us clothe them and feed them, because what you're building here is going to impact children whose parents are working 2 and 3 jobs just to put food on the table. And they can't pay for the utility bills, and they're making decisions whether to put gas in their car or feed their children. So please look carefully, because those of us who have done not just the research, but the long-term look at this and have sat in, on these kind of conversations about 45 years, please don't jump at something just because there's billions to be made.
Thank you, Colleen.
Hi, my name is Jeremy Lowry. I'm a resident of District 5. Been a Murray resident for about 13 years and really grateful for everyone's time and the opportunity to just say a few words about this site. I do support a commercially oriented redevelopment of this site with limited housing, with the housing options being individually parceled units. I think that a commercial redevelopment of this site will enhance and deepen our tax base. I think it can provide additional choices and options for services and for also employment opportunities for residents of Murray. And I think it can drive additional revenue to other Murray businesses. With that, thank you for your time and really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeremy.
I am Jim Allred, and 5151 South 900 East is where my business has been for 40 years. I've been a resident of Murray for about 40 years and unfortunately had to leave here a little while ago because I wanted to downsize and I had a hard time finding a place to downsize in. But our architectural practice has been here in Murray forever. We designed the Murray Park Center. We designed and built it. I worked in the 1970s to do a downtown study of the elevations of the buildings in downtown Murray and the reservation and the preservation of these buildings. I taught in graduate school in historic preservation, and I'm very sensitive to those types of things. Actually, we designed this historic building you pointed out over here by the park. And so I believe that you can take the things. I've been sitting here trying to learn from everybody and what they've been saying. And might I say, we've had good leadership in Murray. Our leadership's been great. I don't think they've been self-centered. I think they've worked to the best for everyone in the community. And I really believe that, honestly, because we've worked with great people. Through the process, I believe you can accomplish what you're looking for. I believe with the right design, you can come in and coordinate this and make sure it meets the needs of what the big survey had indicated that you wanted to see in Murray. And I believe that that can be accomplished. I believe that housing would be, and the multi-use aspect would be really great. You know, other cities have tried to renovate schools like this, Riverton, for example. And Riverton spent $5 or $6 million renovating that school for their city center. We were hired by Draper City to do a new city hall for them. And they said, let's renovate the old building. And we looked at it and said, well, Riverton did $5 million. We can build you a brand new building for $5 million. Okay, we were hired by Murray a number of years ago to design a city hall on this site. They asked us where we thought it should be, and we said, this is the heart. This is what it ought to be, is right here. And so evidently they decided for economic reasons to put it somewhere else. But I think this is still the heart of the city. And I believe if it's designed appropriately, and if we are sensitive with what we do, it doesn't have to be a high-rise building. It can be a very comfortable type of design. And so, you know, it's what I do for a living. It's what I've been doing for 40 years. And I've appreciated being associated with Murray City. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mayor, I was waiting for you to get up. I knew you couldn't stay seated.
Well, I couldn't stay seated because I get to stand up and say I've lived here for 44 years and my ancestors have lived here since the 1850s. Now, there's a sentimental value to historic structures. I understand that. I was the one that sat through literally hundreds of hours of meetings and discussions about trying to save the chimneys. They were a major liability that could have impacted negatively the lives of people that lived in Murray and the high school. If that tornado had hit, I did my research, good chance they would have come down. Same with the earthquake we experienced recently. They needed to come down. Now, this has been a great meeting for me to listen to all the different options, you know, and it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But I will tell you this, as an owner of 3-acre industrial park, and, you know, my property values have gone up substantially, $5 million more in taxes this year. Not million, excuse me, 5,000, holy mackerel. Okay, 5,000, the price of the property has gone way up. It's worth a lot more than I ever paid for it. But let me say this. I've done a lot of research regarding the renovation and restoration of existing structures and how it really plays out in the long run. And I think Jim's point was very salient about building a new building that has the ability to adapt and bring in all the new technologies that are needed today for internet, for heating and air conditioning, structural integrity to make sure an earthquake doesn't take it down. It doesn't really pencil out to do this building. Now, I bring that up because my wife says, all you do is read at night and look at things. I said, I want to be knowledgeable. I want to know what really works and what doesn't work on a historical basis. Like I mentioned before, Oakland Construction, they're good friends of mine. They were asked to renovate and restore West High School. Anybody know what the deal is on West High School now? Huh? What's going to happen to it? They're going to tear it down because it didn't pencil out. They spent tens of millions of dollars to restore that structure, and at the end of the day, it did not pencil out. I have to tell you, it saddened me because the Lamborns who owned the Carnegie Library and where the school was, you don't know all the meetings I went through with them where they were crying literally because they could not meet the building code to make that safe for a charter school any longer. It did not pencil out. And when the people bought it and said, we want to save it, I said, well, you know, where's your money? Like I said, I restored a 100-year-old house and it cost me $65,000, but I loved the structure and I made my money back, believe me, real shortly because I only paid $50,000 for it and I got my money back in 3 years on the rent. Okay, now here it is not going to pencil out. And who's going to come in the building and look at what you're going to spend to try and make this building functional. I can tell you right now, didn't work for West High School. Spence Eccles, who's a friend of mine, just said, hey, I'm not going to invest in Utah Theater. I want a brand new state-of-the-art theater. And that's what we need to look at here. The options for this property, it's a jewel. It just needs to be polished now with putting something on it that gives back to the city. And, you know, this is interesting to me. People used to complain. I'm up on time. Okay, I won't go on forever unless I were speaking
I hate
for all
to
the other
say
people.
it.
You're fine. Anyway, at the end of the day, what I was getting up here to say is, let's do something here and take all the property and put it together as a package and instead of trying to save just a little sliver up right here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I still call you Mayor. Okay, is the mayor going to have the last word? Kind of sounds like it. All right, we will close the public hearing and give it back to Jared. Jared, is there?
Thank you. It would be impossible for me to try to address all the things that came out in the comments, but sincerely thanks for being here. Thanks to the RDA board for being willing to take the comments, and it helps us to hear the things that are on people's minds, the concerns that they have. So yeah, I wouldn't try in the 4 minutes or so that we have to the end of the meeting to try to do that. So Do you have any questions for us specifically, or any things that I could try to address for you in the few minutes that we have?
I think we're good.
Oh.
I know. We could be here.
You could go all night. I
could
would say
be
just
here
really
all-
quickly, just one thing that springs to mind is there's a lot of things that can't really be answered really quickly, but one thing that we can answer quickly is about infrastructure and capacity. That was mentioned about power, and that's something that we can look at again. But the MCCD zone, this area was planned for, in terms of public utilities and infrastructure. This area, everything that's in the zone was planned for 100 units the acre and can carry that capacity. And we've never talked about going further than that kind of density. In fact, we're down from that on the east side. So I don't worry about utilities. There's other things that need to be addressed, obviously, but that's one thing just to be aware of. We have looked at that. It was looked at years ago, and that most of the infrastructure is in place. Yeah.
Okay, thank
Thanks.
you, Jared. And thank you, everyone that came. I just love to see this. This is just wonderful for us. We really appreciate the feedback. You guys are awesome. And our next meeting will be Tuesday, February 21st, right here in the chambers, and we are adjourned. Thank you again. And Orden, thank you. We really appreciate your helping us with this.